Have you ever wondered what the world looked like before we had satellites? Before Google Maps could guide us to the nearest coffee shop? For most of human history, maps were not just tools for navigation. They were windows into the human imagination, filled with myths, monsters, and magnificent mistakes. Today, we're embarking on a journey through time to uncover the story of how our ancestors drew their world. From clay tablets to sprawling sea charts, this is the history of the map. A story of discovery, faith, and the quest to understand our place on this planet. Our story begins over 2,500 years ago in ancient Babylon. Picture a small clay tablet, now known as the Babylonian map of the world. It's the earliest surviving world map we have. At its center is Babylon, the navel of the world, bisected by the Euphrates River. The world is a flat disk, surrounded by a bitter, circular ocean. Beyond this ocean lies 7 mysterious islands, described as places where legendary heroes and mythical beasts reside. This wasn't just geography, it was a cosmic diagram, placing their civilization at the very heart of existence. It tells us that for the Babylonians, the world they knew was the only world that truly mattered. Then came the ancient Greeks, who brought philosophy and mathematics to map-making. Thinkers like Anaximander and Hecataeus were among the first to try and draw the entire known world, Asia and Libya, which is what they called Africa, neatly arranged around the Mediterranean Sea. But it was Ptolemy, a Greco-Roman scholar in Alexandria, who revolutionized the field. Around 150 AD, he wrote his masterpiece. Geographia. Ptolemy wasn't just drawing, he was calculating. He introduced the concepts of latitude and longitude, creating a grid system that allowed for a more scientific and systematic approach to mapping. He collected coordinates from travelers and sailors, attempting to plot thousands of locations. Of course, he made errors. He dramatically overestimated the size of Asia and underestimated the circumference of the Earth. These miscalculations would have huge consequences over 1,000 years later. But Ptolemy's work was so influential, it became the absolute authority on geography for the next 1,500 years. His vision of the world, a sphere mapped with a scientific grid, laid the groundwork for all Western cartography to come. As the Roman Empire faded and the Middle Ages dawned in Europe, map-making took a fascinating turn. The scientific precision of Ptolemy was largely replaced by a more spiritual and symbolic vision of the world. Enter the Mappa Mundi, or cloth of the world. These weren't meant for navigation. You couldn't use a Mappa Mundi to get from Paris to Rome. Instead, they were visual encyclopedias of Christian faith and medieval knowledge. The most famous example is the Hereford Mappa Mundi, a massive map drawn on a single sheet of calfskin around the year 1300. On this map, the world is a flat disk, oriented with east at the top, towards the Garden of Eden. At the very center is Jerusalem, the spiritual heart of the world. The map is a whirlwind of stories. You can find Noah's Ark resting on a mountain, the Tower of Babel, and the path the Israelites took out of Egypt. It's populated not just with cities and rivers, but with bizarre creatures from mythology, and folkloremen with heads in their chests, dog-headed people, and fearsome grit. It was a moral and historical document, designed to teach biblical history and reinforce a worldview centered on faith. It showed a world where the divine, the human, and the monstrous all coexisted. It was a map of belief, not a map of coastlines. While faith guided European maps, a golden age of science was flourishing in the Islamic world. Scholars there preserved and built upon the works of Ptolemy. Cartographers like Olidrisi, working in the 12th century for the Norman king of Sicily, created incredibly advanced maps. His Tabula Rogeriana was accompanied by a detailed book describing the climate, culture, and economy of the known world. It was one of the most accurate world maps of its time, combining Greek knowledge with information from Arab merchants and explorers who traveled vast trade networks from Spain to the far reaches of Asia. These maps were practical and scientific, a stark contrast to the symbolic Mappa Mundi of Christian Europe, and they would become crucial resources when Europe reawakened to the idea of global exploration. Now let's talk about the blunders. Some of the most beautiful maps in history are famous for being spectacularly wrong. Perhaps the most famous mapping mistake of all time is the island of California. For over 150 years, from the 1600s well into the 1700s, European mapmakers depicted California not as a peninsula, but as a massive island separated from the North American mainland by a vast sea. Where did this idea come from? It likely originated from a Spanish novel, a work of fiction that described a mythical island paradise named California. A Spanish explorer, misinterpreting the Baja California Peninsula, reported sighting a sea, and the myth took root. Mapmakers, eager to fill in the blanks on their charts, copied the error from one another. It became a cartographic fact, printed on countless maps, even after other explorers proved it was attached to the mainland. The allure of an island paradise was just too strong to let go. Another classic error was the Phantom Island. For centuries, maps were littered with islands that simply didn't exist. There was the island of Hybrazil, a mythical land off the coast of Ireland that was said to appear only once every 7 years. There was Antillia, the island of 7 cities, a massive rectangular island in the Atlantic. These weren't just fantasies. They were often based on sailors' reports of distant fog banks, navigational errors, or just pure rumor. But once an island made it onto a respected map, it gained a life of its own. Other sailors would search for it, and mapmakers would dutifully copy it, sometimes for hundreds of years, until overwhelming evidence finally forced them to erase it from the map. These mistakes remind us that map-making was an act of interpretation and guesswork, a process of slowly and painfully correcting the errors of the past. Everything changed in the 15th and 16th centuries. The age of discovery, spurred on by new shipbuilding technology, the magnetic compass, and a thirst for trade routes to the east, blew the old maps wide open when Christopher Columbus, using Ptolemy's underestimated size of the Earth, sailed west to find Asia. He didn't find it. He stumbled upon a new world. Suddenly, the tidy, 3-continent world of Ptolemy and the Mappa Mundi was obsolete. An entire hemisphere was missing. This created a crisis for mapmakers. How do you draw a world that has suddenly doubled in size? The first attempts were clumsy. Early maps show the Americas as a thin strip of land or a series of scattered islands. But as explorers like Amerigo Vespucci Thurman, for whom the continents were named, sailed the coasts, a clearer picture began to emerge. The Iwuling Sea walled Simula map was the first to label the new lands. America, and the first to show the Americas as a distinct continent, separate from Asia, with a vast ocean between them, the Pacific. This was a monumental shift in human consciousness. For the first time, humanity had a map that showed the entire globe. The challenge now was how to represent this round Earth on a flat piece of paper. This is the projection problem. In 1569, Gerardus Mercator, a Flemish cartographer, created a solution that would change the world: the Mercator projection. It was designed for sailors. On his map, lines of constant compass bearing are straight, making navigation across the open ocean much easier. The trade-off, however, is massive distortion. Landmasses near the poles, like Greenland and Antarctica, are stretched to enormous sizes. Greenland looks bigger than Africa, when in reality Africa is 14 times larger. Despite this, the Mercator projection became the standard map of the world, shaping our mental image of the planet for centuries. The story of the map is far from over. From the detailed surveys of the 18th and 19th centuries that filled in the interiors of continents to the aerial photography of the 20th century and the satellite data of today, our ability to map the world has become ever more precise. We can now map the ocean floor, the surface of Mars, and even the intricate pathways of the human brain. But looking back at these old maps, we see more than just outdated geography. We see the evolution of human knowledge. We see the world through the eyes of our ancestors, a world centered on their home, a world guided by faith, a world filled with monsters and myths, and a world slowly, painstakingly revealed by courage and curiosity. Each map is a snapshot of its time, a beautiful, flawed, and profoundly human attempt to make sense of our place in the cosmos. They remind us that the world is always bigger than the map we have for it. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through cartographic history. If you enjoyed this exploration, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more stories about how we came to understand our world. See you next time.